Oh, hello. And
Hello, Paul. Lovely to meet you. Well, we are now joined
well, as you can
by...
see, we have former Prime Minister and former Treasurer Paul Keating joining us slightly earlier than I had anticipated, but a delight to...
There's improvisation's good.
No worries, you snuck up behind me there.
Well, I've done a bit of that in my life.
Well, look, as we've seen in the past, governments change, Labor takes power when there is a bold agenda. We saw it with Gough Whitlam, we saw it with Bob Hawke, we saw it with Kevin Rudd. But more importantly also, there has to be a mood for change. Are these preconditions existing?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I think, look, the economy, the opportunity has been frittered away by the Tories, by the Liberals, The economy is just dribbling along at 2%. There's been no wage growth for 5 years. The whole sort of opportunity of the place has sort of been passed over. It's time for a renewal. I think Bill Shorten's speech today, speaks about the need for renewal and the propensity of the community to actually accept it.
He's made the contest about the economy. You must be glad about that, or is it always about the economy? No,
it's about the economy and society. The economy is there for society, But, the Liberals have got nothing to offer, I'm surprised, how threadbare their program is. If you look, there is no panorama, there's no vista, there's no shape, there's no talk about where Australia fits in the world, as if China hasn't happened, And what's their plea? Trickle-down economics and a tax cut 5 years away. They have such a poor opinion of the ordinary person. They think they'll sell their vote for a tax cut 5 years away.
Well, let's
help us.
Let me ask you about wages. Under Bill Shorten, we've heard today that he is promising intervention. We know that he wants to change some of the rules of the Fair Work Commission. He's promising to subsidise some workers, even workers who work in the private sector. Is this a good plan?
Yeah, because look, we've got an enterprise bargaining system which has carried us through 28 years of growth, but it's not operating down the bottom end. There's not enough competitive forces out there for people in the bottom couple of deciles. Up the top, of course, we wouldn't have pattern bargaining in a fit because you just get high inflation again. But down the bottom where that compression's happening, what Bill's trying to do is sort of loosen up the bottom wage system, lifting the minimum wage up and the next two deciles sort of loosening them up a bit. That'll take a bit of time, but you'll be able to do it.
It's going to take a lot of money too.
No.
We're looking at hundreds of thousands of workers who are going to have their wages subsidised by the taxpayer.
Just take people on the childcare workers. They have no bargaining power. If you're a person working in childcare, you have no bargaining power, none. So it's not even a revolutionary idea to lift their wages.
Yeah, but some of them are working for companies that are making multi-million-dollar profits.
Well, they're not paying them, that's the point. The companies are sitting... Look, what's happened, Andrew, is this. We've had just on 10 percentage points of labour productivity in 5 years. It's all gone to profits. Not a cent of it has gone to wages. It's all been retained on balance sheets. So your point is, yes, these people work for big companies, but the big companies are not paying. Wages growth has been 1.9% a year, roughly, but inflation's been 1.9%. So there's no real growth, but the 2%, the productivity growth, has just gone to the company's balance sheets.
Isn't this a global story, Mr. Keating, where you've got economic growth is now showing up more in corporate profits and jobs growth, but not wages? This is not just an Australian story.
No, but what do we do about it? Do we sit and watch people's real income decline? Or do we... Look, what we have to do is we keep modernising the economy. Look, we're going to see an economy that looks like this. We're going to see the democratisation of energy. Everyone will have their own energy. They'll have it on their roof. We're going to see a much more horizontal, collaborative world with the internet, with the opportunity for it. What we've got to do to give Australia a real show is let ordinary people, particularly young people, swim and adapt in the great new international possibility of the internet. You know, so these are the challenges of income growth for Australia now. You know, we've got to be in that high-end digital economy. You know, we've got to leave the low jobs growth behind. But some people will be in the low jobs, and they're the ones we've got to help.
Are you comfortable, though, Mr. Keating, with the government intervening so insofar as actually subsidising wages? Is that something that makes
Listen, the government has a policy of telling companies to divest of assets, for God's sake.
But, I mean, that is the coalition's policy, but a future Labor government?
how bad are the Liberals? Imagine if a Labor government was out there with a federal power to make industrial companies, force them to divest of assets. I mean, you know, Stutchbury at the Financial Review will be crying reds under beds, you know. I mean, the Business Council will be wetting itself. And here's a Liberal Party pushing people, and then they say, oh, well, you want to lift some person up in a trial scare. Shocking. But mind the way, we'll actually just knock companies off and tell them to sell assets.
So where does it end, though?
The gall of them is unbelievable.
But you have childcare workers. What about aged care workers? Isn't that the problem here, that you've got a thin end of the wedge now?
Yeah. Look, the thing is, what will happen over time, and is happening already, that artificial intelligence and machine learning will push people into lower income jobs. That's what will happen. What government's got to do is try and lift their income in those jobs and their opportunities.
Surely can't subsidise every worker, though.
No, and why would you bother?
Well, let's talk about superannuation. This is one of your favourite subjects. The Grattan Institute says that Labor, in pushing for an increase to the superannuation guarantee from 9.5% to 12%, which is where many superannuation experts want it, will cost wages.
Oh, that is a lie.
Why is it a lie?
It's a lie because there's been no wages growth for 5 years, and there's not likely to be. So the only
Even under Labor?
The only way that people are guaranteed at least 2.5% of that 10% of labour productivity, which the companies are sticking to, is to have it paid by legislation under the superannuation guarantee from 9.5 to 12.
Let's just back it up a bit there. You don't think that there's going to be wage growth for the next 5 years?
No. What I'm saying is that the country has to return to wage growth, but the quickest and easiest way of getting 2.5 of that 10% of labour productivity that companies are sitting on is to pay it as superannuation and pay it early. In other words, we've had a wages drought, and the way to break the drought is to pay it as super 2.5%. I mean, look, the Grattan Institute is bordering on the wicked. It's bordering on the wicked. Now, that's not an adjective I would throw around. But the Grattan Institute is bordering on the wicked, trying to rob ordinary working people of 2.5% wage equivalent in super. And the other thing is we get to 12% super. You know, when you get to 12% superannuation, we can guarantee that over a person's working life, they'll retire on 3/4 of their last week's pay at work. You cannot do that at 9%.
Is that enough, though, or would you see it going higher than 12%? Is 12% the ideal?
No, 12%. If you join the workforce at 25, retire at 65, and your fund earns 6.5%, 12% will get you there. But 9.5 won't. So we end up with a sort of a limping along superannuation system. And the obvious, and both parties, this is the key point, both the Labor Party and the Liberal Party have agreed to pay the 2.5%. But what Grattan and these people are arguing is they should unlegislate the increase.
Okay, but we're in a low wage growth environment. Say wage growth is 2%, pretty limp. You mandate 0.5% increase every year for superannuation.
No, it's not coming out of wages. That's the point.
The company
it's coming out of the company profits. It's coming out. See, you've got to follow.
You had an accord.
Follow the bouncing ball. Labour productivity has risen by 1.9% for 5 years, just on 10. Where has that 10 gone? To the balance sheet of companies. So why wouldn't they pay 2.5% back? That's the point.
Given the current political environment, online activism, would the Hawke-Keating period of reform have been as successful?
Oh yeah. Big ideas are always winners. I mean, the Twitter sphere prospers when there are no ideas out there. You know, But once you shape the debate and you put the big ideas out there, like Shorten has done today, like Bill Shorten has done today, what it does, it gathers followers, you know. You become the Pied Piper, you know. And when you become the Pied Piper, you pick up adherents. But if there's no Pied Piper, the Twitter sphere takes over, you know.
All right, now let me bring up another subject. You've gotten 32 years ago, you invented the concept of franking credits, dividend imputation. It was extended by John Howard. It's going to be wound back by Bill Shorten.
It wasn't extended by John Howard, it was abused by John Howard.
Okay.
Abused,
right.
Not extended.
He might not say that.
Yeah, but he's not the guy that set it up. I did.
Do you agree that the franking credits that some retirees now rely on are a gift that should be taken away?
Absolutely, it's completely a gift. Let me just make the point. The whole point of dividend imputation, which I put in on top, above the Treasury, by the way, above the Treasury, was to remove the double tax on company income. So company income was paid once. What the Howard Costello change do was to make company income paid nonce. No company income. Dividend imputation was only meant to relieve the double tax so that company income was taxed once, not that it should not be taxed at all. What happens now is that the company income is not taxed at all because the company income is gifted to the non-taxpayer. So the Commonwealth doesn't get the company tax it would otherwise get. So the Howard changes were, look, Costello and Howard had the money rolling in. They wanted the grey vote, so they abused the system by putting this gift in, like they abused the system by making these, in the end, unaffordable concessional changes to superannuation, which even the Liberals have had to fix.
All right,
but I suppose that's the cold hard economics of it. But you're a politician. How risky is this for the Labor Party? Because as we have seen, it's very difficult to take away.
What Australia needs is a program of the kind that Bill Shorten has just announced, with a modest increase in revenue to GDP. Right? What the Labor Party is saying, for a modest increase in income to GDP, revenue to GDP, we will provide better hospitals, access to equity in health, access to equity in education, superannuation, disabilities, and that extra revenue is coming not from the ordinary person in the street, it's coming from these tax concessions. The negative gearing change, the change the concessional treatment of capital gains, and the franking credits. In other words, what Shorten's arguing is completely reasonable. He's saying, look, a modest increase in revenue, but coming from the tax concessions that should never have been there to give you a better country.
Can I turn to coal?
Coal.
What would you do if you were still running this country when it came to coal exports? It's all very well us talking about our emissions, but what about what we export?
Look, coal is the fuel of the Industrial Revolution 250 years ago. It's all over. You know,
it's worth a hell of a lot of money to Federal Treasury.
Here's the Prime Minister walking around with a lump of coal. I mean, you know, coal's a fossil, and the problem is the Prime Minister's a fossil himself. He's a fossil with a baseball cap, but he's a fossil.
It's a fossil that has also allowed us to build roads, to build schools and hospitals. What do you do?
No, look,
you're leading the country now. What do you do?
What'll happen? The world will stop using fossil fuels. It's as simple as that. The cost of renewables has come down 90% in about 15 years. I mean, continental Australia is one of the hot plates of the world. You can almost fry an egg on any footpath or any roadway at any time in this country. We can produce here such an enormous supply of electricity from renewables that gives us that would underwrite the hydrocarbon economy. So hydrogen economy, hydrogen gas, hydrogen fuels. I mean, you look at the great continental divide of Australia and the fact that it has sun. This is the land of sun. So this is the place, perhaps first in the world, where renewables could be, you know, the primary source of energy. Yet we have the Liberals going back to Mr. Stevenson's steam train of 250 years ago.
How do we replace the revenue, the giant revenue that comes from coal?
It'll come. How you replace it? By producing hydrogen fuels, electricity, general energy from renewables, which are now cheaper by way of capital to introduce than coal. You know, the idea, only the Liberal Party could think up going back to Stephenson's steam engine of 1750 and wanting to build new coal-fired power stations. I mean, you know, they're just living in the past.
Would an incoming Labor government...
They're policy deadbeats. Absolute policy deadbeats.
All right. Would an incoming Labor government have to do something to heal relations with China?
I think all we have to do is recognise the legitimacy of China. The fact that 20% of humanity has dragged itself from poverty. I mean, is this illegitimate? Of course it's not illegitimate. It may not suit the United States. There's a second-grade economic power in the world, but we can't just as...
So is there healing to be done?
I think there's healing to be done, but I think a Labor government would make a huge shift, just merely making the point that China's entitled to be there, rather than being some illegitimate state that has to be strategically watched.
But nobody's questioning its legitimacy to be there, but isn't it the more nefarious actions of the Chinese government that has our security agencies confirmed it's contested waters?
When the security agencies are running foreign policy, the nutters are in charge. You know, the nutters are in charge.
The security agencies that would be advising Labor.
Oh yeah, well you clean them out. You clean them out. I mean, once that Garnaut guy come back from China, and Turnbull gave him the ticket to go and hop into the security agency, they've all gone Burko ever since. You know, when you've got the ASIO chief knocking on MPs' doors, you know something's wrong.
So you think there should be a clean out of ASIO, ACES?
Oh yeah,
a lot.
Look, they've lost their strategic bearings, these organisations. You know, China, whatever you think, China is a great state. It's always been a great state and now has the second largest economy, soon the largest economy in the world. If we have a foreign policy that does not take that into account, we are fools. You know?
All right.
Mr. Keating, we could continue all day, but that's all we have time for now. Thank you so much for joining us.
I could continue all day myself.
Well, thank you so much for joining us in a surprising way too.
Well, you asked me.
I did, but
we did ask. Thank you very much. We
not quite like that.
Thank you very much.
Good on you.
All right,
well,
Mr. Keating departs our stage. We're about to welcome our ALP National President, Wayne Swan.